Good evening and good morning and good everything to the listeners out there. This is episode number 17 of Bongversations, the show that takes things to where no other show has gone, the Star Trek of podcasts. Right. You're going to go in places you've never been before, and Dave J's the man to take you there. And it's the 1st of December at my end of the world, and he'll be going there in a couple of hours' time. Dave, how are you, man?
Doing well.
We're going to talk about Gilligan's Island. Can you believe Gilligan's Island? One of the greatest sitcoms or comedies of most people's childhoods. Incredibly popular show, very well-known show by a lot of people. So, what can you tell us about Gilligan?
Yeah. I was thinking first. It's also the 11-3 idea for those that like sync. Sync. It's on my side. It's still 11-3. The 11th month and the 30th, so that's for the sync fans of 311, or the day that it can be characterized. I know there's someone out there that likes that idea of the characterized as a pandemic. That was the idea of the 311 for the COVID hoax.
That was very much.
Which is interesting in that in Gilligan, ILLI is right there after the G and between two G's. But Gilligan itself, just to kind of get to the idea of what Gilligan's Island is, as a, it's a TV show that Sherwood Schwartz created. Yep. Now that's the same guy who did Brady Bunch. So this is bringing in these different ideas of, with regard to Brady Bunch, the idea of the kind of grafted family, the kind of the broken family becomes a grafted whole family idea. And then with Gilligan's Island, the idea of 7 castaways, the idea of a mind cast away to a place whose hope is to get back home. Almost like if you think back to the Wizard of Oz we talked about with the idea of Dorothy, who their goal through all these episodes, and they never actually get there, just to break it to you, is to get back home. So then it's the idea of then what then is Gilligan's? So Gilligan, if you take it, it's 71 in simple gematria. That's the same as, now these are interesting words because they're the ideas of lights or ways. Babylon, Moses, Apollo, the idea of Emmanuel. And also, this goes back to the prisoner, the idea of balloon. Remember, the balloon would take you back in the prisoner? So the balloon is also 71. So Gilligan, and 7 plus 1 is 8. Remember, you were talking about how the 17th episode is tonight's. And there you go, the 8. So the details, that idea. So then, now we're going to go on to Gilligan's Island. The idea of island is what you would think of as almost like a plate or a flat piece in surrounded by water with deviations, called depth and elevation of mountains and little valleys. Think of like Hawaiian Islands around. So then you have an island. And with Gilligan's Island, you have 149, which is the completion number of that in simple gematria, which is the same as skull and bones, end of the world, the idea of, and that's what they're thinking that they're in, this idea that they're always trying to escape because they're in this environment they want to leave, or something that they don't consider true life. Right? Judas Iscariot, so the idea of being betrayed, and corruption. Now, corruption happens in that through really, what's his nuts, neglect. The main character, Bob Denver, always kind of plays this clumsy kind of dumbbell who is constantly through neglect screwing up an opportunity. So there might have been an opportunity to get to go away, and then he
stuffs it up.
Yeah, he stuffs it up. And then
so
there's
that character. He's been that character in a number of shows, hasn't he? Like he was Dobie Gillis. I think he was played a beatnik character, a hippie character, the same exact character.
Yeah. And then also at the same time you have Gilligan, like the idea of Gilly means happiness. So the idea of these ideas always brought happiness to the mind, or the seven castaways, because it reminded them, oh, this is and remember the professor would get a briefcase, and he's like, without even looking at this, this is our way out of here. He always gave them this false hope at the beginning, and they all
so
perked
science.
up.
So science was basically represented by the professor.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And
in fact,
Gilligan is the naive man of humanity, or the clown.
Yeah,
possibly.
yeah. In fact, even in season 1, episode 3, that would be the idea of the corona or mind, the idea of the 13, or the door. It was called voodoo something to me, and that's where he came up with the coconut radio, the lie detector, and the alarm system. So
yeah, incredible,
so
incredible.
in that, yeah. So in that same episode, you have this try idea. Try, 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 or TRI, the idea of 3. So a coconut radio, the idea of receiving communication that's out there already. Then you have a lie detector, a way to detect if that communication is true or false. And then you have an alarm system, one that then can detect an intruder, right? So if you think about this in a way of the mind, think of that in the idea of, at the end of Gilligan, you have GANS. So GANS in computer terms, or even in terms that you would know called AI, or the idea of adaptive machine learning, it's generative adversarial networks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now the way this works, Rick, is simple. You're going to have, and you talked about this last week with dimensions. Now within this so-called machine learning or generative adversarial networking, you have a high dimensional sample space, which could be represented by real images. All right. And then you have low dimensional latent space. Latent space meaning that it's amorphous, it's yet to be. It has the ability to become, but it has not yet been created to. That is the low dimensional latent space, which is called the generative network, or the G. Notice that, the G, which is your 7 or your 3. That's the same within the Phoenician. Your third spot is what you would see in your English, or in the idea of numbers, 7, or the scribe mark that you recognize as a 7. All right. So then that's called the generative network. What the generative network then does is it generates fake images through that latent space on and then it goes into what's called a discriminative network. Now the discriminative network decides on if the image is real or fake. And now what happens is if it decides that it's fake, then the generative network, the G, will change its tone, right? The idea, then resubmit another generated fake image until it passes whatever threshold the programmer decides the discriminative network is going to allow through. So that's why you'll have certain AI, so-called quote unquote, that can be gated, meaning that the end user is only allowed to get this close to being correct. You'll remember that. Yeah, you'll remember that when we talked about last week with the idea of information, and with the prisoner.
The prisoner.
Yeah, with the 3-year course in 3 minutes. Remember that all that information was being generated through the generative network, given to the actual discriminative network, and the discriminative network is the D, or the person itself. It's that door that you allow this information in. So you become that discriminative network. You decide if what you are receiving from the generative network is real or not. Right? Because so then you say, okay, is it real or fake? And now what happens is if people don't pay attention, they won't notice that fake images and AI videos have been being laced into newscasts on and off, even computer or game images as well, and
Yep.
being passed off as being real. And so then people will then, if they're not discriminative, if they lose their ability or their discriminative network, they can no longer tell real from fake, and they become quite useless. That's the exact way that this GANs at the Gilligans again. Yeah, that's the exact way that works. It's a generative adversarial network, and that is how AI works supposedly, and that's why it's called adaptive or machine learning, because it's quite simply creating an output and taking what you don't like about it, regurgitating it back to you, and you say that's almost better, and you and as long as you fine tune it, it finally learns, quote unquote, what you want from it, and then as it can recall, or if it remembers, and that's just put into memory as being an and or gate, meaning if this or that, and this or that, meaning it's just simply going to take from column A and put it into column B to give you that 3-year course in 3 minutes idea down the road. So then people will be talking to each other as if they know something, but it's all just generative network nonsense, because the discriminative network of the person, the person's, their discernment has been replaced with love of the world or love of the ideas of the world, the Gilligan. All right.
Interesting. So the McGoohan is loaded with names and things, and the Gilligan, Gilligan's is loaded literally with predictive. Incredibly amount of deep connective things to the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course we talked, Rick.
Who apart from you would have noticed that? I haven't noticed that.
Yeah.
Who would have noticed that? You did.
And just to reiterate, we talked earlier about season 1, episode 3 with the coconut radio, lie detector, and alarm system. So that then ties into what I just told you about the generative adversarial network. You see how it in the story of early TV, as a child, you were shown that because the computer did not exist at the time, or so it was shown to you that way. And you'll notice that episodes that were in color are more powerful than those that are in so-called black and white.
Were there some in color and some in black and white back in the day?
Yeah, the first season of Gilligan's Island was black and white, and then it went, and then 2 and 3 were in color.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and then I Dream of Jeannie, the same actually. So then you had kind of those similar ideas back then of those shows that were kind of.
Oh, we'll have to do. That's another show. I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched, the shows that need to be discussed because there's so much in those ones. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and then so we're almost ready to talk about. Actually, we've almost gotten to the island, but that just even talking about the name. So now you kind of know what these stories are going to be telling you. You know what they're going to be offering to the actual viewer. So over the 3 seasons, and even to the point to where you get to the end and you realize that the characters, the 7, the mind, never did escape. Right?
No, they didn't.
And it was kept in the details. And then that's kind of some of the stuff I wanted to talk to you about as far as once we get on the old island. And so so what'd you think about that?
Fantastic. Well, as usual, we went through this last week with McGoohan and the pie and face, custard pie and face, and now we're going through this with breaking down from the gill to the GANs, GANS. Wow. Well, what more can I say? You just keep going, man, because I've got nothing to add when you hit to those levels. I'm just going to go, wow, as I do a fair bit on these shows.
Yeah, well, there's also the idea now. This is going to make you. This is interesting. I hope. Now, even all these years later, today, where it matters at this very moment that we're talking about, how does this even matter. It matters in that the idea that I just talked to you about, the generative adversarial network, is said to be, produced by this guy named Ian Goodfellow, which for all intents and purpose looks to be completely generated character, like an AI generated character, who is associated with a guy named Andrew Ng. Ng. That guy is almost like what you see as the X character, the Elon Musk type character, to where he's a face who's put in front of an idea of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and deep learning.ai, that type thing, and he's put forward as this character who came up with all this stuff, but he yet is just a figurehead for an idea that's put out through, let's just say, for lack of a better term, the matrix, or the idea of just computer driven generation. And there are certain characters, let's say the idea of process engineers and those type engineers, the specs that they are given, the only deviations they can make are within tolerance levels, which are designed into the finished product, meaning that it's very hard to screw it up. So you can play around a little bit and think you're actually doing this job of a process engineer and changing the amount of gold to be sputtered onto a semiconductor wafer to make it, but you're only working within allowable specs that were given to you in the first place. So then those are the type of jobs that are given to those that have a higher intellect and more and are able to be kept busy. Otherwise, they would catch on to the gag a lot sooner, So they're given these different ideas at NASA and all these places where they think they're actually doing something. They're actually producing a product. It's just in the end not doing what they think it's doing. But they're actually producing a product. It's just not what they think they're doing.
It's interesting. I just noticed that Richard Donner was one of the directors of Gilligan's Island. He did The Omen, The Goonies, Lethal Weapon, and Scrooged, amongst lots of, and Man from U.N.C.L.E., Fugitive, Twilight, all shows we've been talking about. Yeah. So there's a big connection with Gilligan's Island and a lot of very high level esoteric movies. So you're spot on.
Oh yeah, well you notice, Rick, even when you look through articles where it claims a certain author, you can tell if someone is writing or just pen writing because the tone of the language changes. You can just tell that that guy's just used to be
exactly. Yeah, well, if Donna's involved, there's deep stuff going into the show, guaranteed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so this Ian Goodfellow, also within that name, I remember I told you kind of, if you look into the names, what's in the name, like there's also the de-wooling. So the idea of de-wooling a sheep, taking the wool off, and that's the idea of learning from the input of the so-called man or woman who's using the so-called AI or allowing the adaptive machine learning to learn, quote unquote. And so they're taking the wool from the sheep. So that's also interesting. And then within that as well, you have the idea of follow or following, right?
Yep.
So then that following is the idea goes back to that 3 year 3-year course in 3 minutes is just the idea of following, just an idea that you think you've been given something that actually means something, and it's just not true. In the end, it's just a script or a story. All right. So I was wanting to talk to you about one particular episode that kind of, first, I guess you kind of talk about who you have, the different parts of the mind. So you have the skipper, which was Alan Hale
Jr.
Yeah, like Hale little Jr. buddy. Yeah, little buddy.
Hey, little buddy.
Yeah, do you know he called Barney Fife little buddy.
Really?
He was in episode in season 2, episode 13. He was in The Farmer Takes a Wife, where he goes into town and he starts trying to manhandle Thelma Lou. and Barney gets all pissed off about it, of course. And
this is on Andy Griffith's show.
Yeah, that's on Andy Griffith. So
Wow.
he calls him in that show
Little buddy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
There's a coincidence.
yeah,
So
and
obviously,
also, I was gonna say also in The Creeping Hand, which was 60 something or other, he plays a sheriff and he calls somebody little buddy, and that's kind of one of those Mystery Science Theater worthy horror movies. Yeah, but it was called The Creeping Hand, and I would say it's 68 or 69. He played the sheriff, and he calls somebody in that little buddy. I recall that as well. That's just funny.
Maybe he just says it offhandedly, and the director goes, keep it in, because it sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, you keep it in. Keep it in the script.
He was always manhandling old Denver. If you notice in the Gilligan, he was always manhandling him. So the two differences that, if you ever get a time to notice, if you ever look at the pilot episode that was put out later, you'll notice that when they're in the rough seas, that Gilligan's trying to give the the skipper coffee, and he's like pushing it away. And then in the actual season or in the series, they're just both at the helm, spinning the wheel around. That's like a few different changes you'll notice, kind of like little comic touches, and that's when you notice who's are certain directors or to me have comic touches. If they leave that type of stuff in, it's funny to me. I find that funny. Yeah. So then in one episode in particular, and I'll jump all the way to the end because it's called The Secret of Gilligan's Island. So it's like, what is the secret then of Gilligan's Island? You already know they don't get off because we kind of let that cat out of the bag. So it's like, what is the secret? So season 3, episode 25, that's your seventh, so it's 3 sevens, 21 blackjack, the idea of what happened in that episode. So what happened in that episode was that they were marching around and they found parts of a tablet. And now this tablet was going to give them an idea of how they were going to get off the island. And what happened was Gilligan found the very final part, which was it had, of course, the key, which of course he winds up busting and breaking, and it gives him the secret of the island. Now within the episode, there's some interesting ideas that are put out, and because they kind of transfer back, or what's kind of you would think about time travel. They go back to like cavemen, or the idea of men in cave. And if you want to know what that goes back to the Book of Adam and Eve, because they lived in the cave of treasure. All right, so then that's the original idea of the caveman. So then within this episode, the caveman, the professor playing the caveman points out to Marianne. He says, "Look, world flat." Point down. He's looking at this flat tablet, and then she goes, "Oh, you walk off edge, fall off." So they do that stupid. That kind of canard type idea, because the missing piece, of course, is going to have the shape of the eye. The eye is what's missing from the point of showing you that flat Earth demonstration, and then following they show you the wheel, and he, instead of rolling the wheel, he pushes the wheel he pushes it over. So it's like you're not looking at the revelation in the right direction. You need to turn it around and then try it again. So then if you use your eye to see that, the eye then, of course, is the symbol, or what is a model of the universe, right? With the iris being where man, plant, animal, water exist. So then that's what that's showing. So then it covers all that stuff. So then the secret to Gilligan's Island, then what happens is he busts this thing up, and at the end the professor comes back and he says, "Oh, Gilligan, don't worry. I messed up on what the meaning was. Because it was saying that they had to get to this island with a bunch of people, and they thought it was to Hawaii.
Yeah,
He says,
they allegedly left Hawaii on a 3-hour trip.
3-hour tour.
Yeah, a 3-hour
Yeah.
tour. So you've got
Yeah.
that 3 in there straight away. And there's
Yeah,
how many
absolutely.
seasons? How many seasons? 3 seasons of Gilligan's Island.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
There you
And
go.
then
Coincidence?
so after so he when he comes in, he says, Gilligan, don't worry about it, because I misread it. It means that all of those people, or all of those different ideas of freedom, were all coming back here. So the island was where the map was leading back to. So it was like a figure 8. For most of the episode, they were kind of producing like it was a way out, and in the end, they were relieved. In fact, or he was relieved by the fact that it just wound up right back where they started from. So it's just like, again, with the final episode, and there's a lot of episodes that do the cross-dressing as well, by the way. But the final episode where they're looking for the white the white queen to kind of throw into this is a local tribe that's trying to snatch a white princess or a white queen.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And what they do, so all the dudes, the professor, the skipper,
cross-dress.
They all cross-dress, and then they finally send old Gilligan looking like an ugly hag out there. Yeah, and I was just and also, if you go back to another one, the Jeff Pruitt character. Oh, I'm sorry. He played Jeff Pruitt in the Andy Griffith Show when he was trying to steal Barney's girl. The actual what's his name? The skipper character. Who played that? Alan Hale. Yeah, when he played it doesn't matter. I was getting too tied up in the different characters.
Oh man, well, it's understandably so, because you're actually spotting all these things that I've never even thought of. I used to watch that show, and so it was a happy kind of afternoon show that you come home from school, and it was on at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and it was on. It was on pretty much all my childhood that I seem to remember. It was repeated endlessly. So there was something in that show they wanted you all to know subconsciously. You're not going to get off that island. You're not getting off the island. That's the takeaway.
And it also just introduced a lot of different ideas, whether it be space travel, the idea of doing.
There was a kind of astronauty kind of thing in there, I do believe. Yeah.
There was also the missing pilot, or the strange pilot that came in, the idea of like the wandering Jew idea, the idea of being told that they were going to be helped, and then that character just leaving, yes. So it's always just also this idea of a dream world. And if you remember, in there was another season that kind of ties in all these different shows we talk about. Get Smart was tied in with the episode of 311, for those that like Sync, Invasion. Now he played within the dream sequence. He played Agent 14, which is the idea of 77, and he kept calling the professor, Chief. Remember, and he had and he had the little pocket full of gadgets. And So you had that little bit of kind of cross dressing as well.
You also have the Magoo. We were talking about last week. Magoo. We got Mr. Magoo, Jim Backus, playing what's his name, the rich guy that was trapped on the island as well. So Jim Backus, the voice of Mr. Magoo, was on that show. So there's a big tie in there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's too many things all of a sudden. Once you start going and analysing the stuff, Sherwood Schwartz was one of those main directors or creators of so many shows, and as I'm now picking up, these were really shows that there was messages in these shows.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Well, it was teaching. Like Brady Bunch, for example, gave you not only the broken family kind of put back together, but it also gave you the idea of the different role models within the different so-called male and female. You had the Marcia and the Jan, you know,
Yeah.
and the
And Cindy.
and the Cindy kind of model.
Cindy
Yeah,
with
yeah,
TH.
Cindy,
Yeah.
and the
Cindy.
Craig, Peter, and Bobby kind of
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
stuff. And because before that, earlier, then you would have certain shows where you had like the Beaver. So you had the older brother and the and Wally
Yeah.
and Beaver would be the different role models of how the so-called kid would act. And so I find that interesting as well. Yeah. So then you had these different characters to choose from, like a
Mm.
roulette.
Yeah.
A roulette. Yeah, and that was a Sherman Schwartz. That was the deal too. That was on another network too. So you had what, CBS with the other one and ABC with that one. So he's one of those though. He also lived in the area that I grew up in. So
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Valley area.
I bet.
So
Yeah.
well, the Simi Valley area is also the place where Rollo's favorite house is, the Poltergeist house.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
if you notice that the Poltergeist, speaking of Poltergeist, if you look at the movie art or the movie poster, uh, the the girl's hands are on the TV, and what's it said above that in quotes is "they're here,"
They're
meaning
here. Yeah.
they're here, like they're here. She's putting it so it's the TV is where they're here. That's the here they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
So then now we're talking about what those are, like specifically the Andy Griff. What's a
Grifter.
griff? You know, it's a griff, but he's also showing you the Andy Griffith character is also leading you into temptation, because if you remember when Rafe Hollister wouldn't get his injection when the
Yeah.
little pretty nurse came into town,
Oh, well,
just
that's, yeah. There you go.
yeah, just because old what's his name, old Andy Taylor got himself all kind of stiffed. He decides he's going to go, and just to satisfy his ego, he hot trots this nurse out to Rafe Hollister's and strong arms him into
Yep.
getting this thing.
A
And
vaccine.
then at the end, Rafe Hollister sitting there like a dumbbell, getting the thing, getting shot up, and then singing like a dumbbell.
Yeah, there you go. I'm telling you, this all these shows are just loaded with stuff that they wanted into your head.
Right.
Loaded with this stuff. Yeah. The
Yeah.
bigger the show, the more shit in it.
And you remember when there was another episode when Barney's complaining about his paycheck, this and that and the other thing, and good old Barney or good old Andy comes up. Oh, let me see that. These are all legitimate deductions, but he's reading off all this stuff, and so he's giving he's actually training you to accept the actual cage you're in.
He's tying you up in knots, Don knots.
Yeah, Don Knotts. So at the time, even though that was really kind of towards the introduction of the payroll structure, it was already being taught what to expect and what's being taken out. So it's already kind of, even at the beginning of that structure, it's still being reinforced through show and TV. Which you should also know, Rick, if you want your novel and sitting at the supermarket shelf, you're going to be inserting into every single book some portion of the narrative, whether it be a remembrance of that day on 9/11, or that day in 1963, or this, that, and the other thing. Just a sentence or two that will ring a bell of those that are predestined to hear it, and then they will either relive the trauma which they have injected into themselves.
Atomic bombs.
Yeah.
9/11. Yeah.
Right.
All of these things. Yeah.
Yeah. So then they relive the trauma that they've self-injected into themselves each and every time that happens to them. But if you've already inoculated yourself with it by not caring about it, then you're not affected by it. So then that's how these different remembrance bells, cowbells that are rung daily in the so-called place or realm will no longer affect you. All right, because you pop the gan off the gilly. You keep the gilly, the happiness, but you get rid of the gan.
Wow.
You don't. Yeah, you get rid of that little tail, baby.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
fantastic.
then, yeah. So and then, yeah, we'll definitely talk about I Dream of Jeannie. That deals with the idea of beauty seducing what is an otherwise um, intelligent man. It also introduces the nonsense of space, but that's very secondary. It's put aside very quickly. It's always kind of in the back. So, but what it's putting forward is this idea, just like Bewitched, of this magical realm and this idea of the woman, the Eve character, being the lead character into these different, let's just say, situations.
Oh, for sure.
Right, and then of course they're covered up by calling them, comical situations, this, that, and the other thing, or even helping situations, or getting ahead of situations. Which, if you recall, the professor was in 2 Twilight Zone episodes that kind of dealt with time travel. And in one of the episodes, he goes back to the day where they bang 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 had the Lincoln play hoax.
Wow.
Now, what he was debating at the beginning of the show, if I go back, or if anybody goes back, this was the debate at the Gentlemen's Club. Was it would you be able to change something, or would you do something to change it? Well, he goes back. He walks out the door. He finds himself back in that time, that night. He tries to do what he can do, and nothing happens. Everything still goes as it would have happened anyway, except for one thing that he discovers when he gets back, which he gets back almost immediately. And what he discovers is that there's a new man sitting at the club. And the new man is sitting at the club because his grandfather recognized, or his grandfather was the cop back then who believed this guy's story and actually acted on it by spreading the word, and he became somewhat of a local hero. He was then promoted to police chief, and of course he became rich after that, which otherwise would not have happened had that guy not gone back into time, so called.
Wow.
So he didn't stop the event, the main event, or what people know as history, but that so-called butterfly effect did affect this other idea, and
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
manifest as wealth generation in that case of someone who otherwise would not have had it.
Well, the Twilight Zone had
Yeah,
so many good
yeah,
shows.
yeah,
So many good shows. And the best
yeah.
writers and best directors. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Another
yeah, that was
another
the professor. So he was the only one out of that cast who was in the Twilight Zone. He was in 2 that dealt with time travel. Really.
interesting. Very
Yep.
interesting. Coincidence? I don't think so. I
Yeah.
don't think so. Because he was, the actor that played him was a very credible kind of smart kind of guy. Believe the scientists. The science will, they can create radios out of coconuts, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
And-
and then also he did a jetpack with bamboo, and
oh,
I
there was some
yeah.
incredible events on that show.
Yeah, yeah, he did palm tree cement as well, and I think the big one at the end of the season 1, or towards the middle maybe, episode 12 possibly. It was when they had the washing machine with the palm fronds as
Yeah,
to agitate them. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
with the bicycle
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
it's
it's
incredible what you
ridiculous.
can do with
Yeah,
coconuts and palm
yeah, yeah,
fronds on
yeah, yeah.
Gilligan's Island. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I was thinking what the idea was. Of adapted learning was that this is the idea of what one accepts. So if you look at these stories, then and all of these different shows were being used or piloted or being produced to see the engagement of the public, or to see what would
Yeah.
be acceptable from the public. So then that of course, before the advent of the actual computer that can be used today. That was that same GANs process we were talking about. It's the same. It's like if a show makes it, it's because the consumer, the one who's consuming or gobbling it, accepts it and then accepts the premise. As soon as the series jumps the shark, it loses focus. Then the public goes away. Then you close it down. There's also the advent of a show that does too well, meaning that if you put out a show that has certain ideas that if too many people understood them properly would be detrimental to the power structure, that goes away as well. So you're wondering, why did that show go away? It seemed to be very good, but it went away too quickly. Go back and look at actually what was being put out. Because a show, just like anything, it's like an echo. So you hear it once, and you said, "What was that?" And you hear it a second time, and you said, "Bing, bing, bing," and then you think about it. So it takes how many times before something can actually make an impression onto you?
Would it be three times?
Right. Yeah. At least that's where you get your first ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you get your first ring because you've repeated it back. So I was thinking about what a different, and also just ideas of minds, like the Schwartz character. May the Schwartz be with you. With then these different shows, there's different books throughout so-called time that were said to be inspired in a sitting, or where the author directly said that they were inspired, and these are ones where you will look to see especially the idea of the fallen influence, because you either have the mind of Christ or the mind of Antichrist. Those are the only two. You either have the mind of truth or of lie, fiction. So then, like The Great Gatsby, which was in 1925, that was the idea of no good deed goes unpunished. And he was said to, or he claimed to have written that, or it was channeled in a way, And then
for sure.
The Book of Mormon, same way. And then there's another which really just deals with, it contains the 4 Gospels of the New Testament, but and some other notes. However, it has these manuscript drawings or like sketches, and they're quite intricate and detailed. However, it's called the Book of Kells. Now, have you heard of that one?
Yeah, I know it's the Irish. I've got some color plates in one of the books I've got of these old, allegedly extremely old. I don't know how old they actually meant to be.
So it's kind of like, they're in your hand now, so they're modern day. So as you look at it modern day, you look at it, and now knowing what you know, you'll notice the hidden hand, you'll notice the winking eye, you'll notice. So because this had to be acceptable, or it had to become acceptable to be put into Catholic canon. And of course, Catholic canon is the idea of the laity of the Jew idea, saying all all of the so-called housed religions that exist in stone buildings are part of the fallen idea of the Antichrist idea. The Catholics are the laity of the Jews. The Jews are the laity of Satan. They all lead to the same liar. So then if you look now at those different characters on those plates, you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see the hidden hand. You'll see the actual winking eye. You'll see the different signs and symbols. Now that you know what they mean, you'll say, no, this doesn't represent what the Gospels represent. It's not the same thing. This image, and you'll also notice that they're addressed and they're presented as schematics. This is interesting because schematics are the way, or if you want to say it as a print of a circuit, might even be better, because if you're dealing with critical dimension scanning electron microscopes, the way that you would look at a semiconductor, if that's the way that you would actually have to look at the structure of the head of processors, anything like that. So if you then use that to see that type of fine detail,
Yeah.
you will see that the in the book of Kells, those different plates, and that's also the plates are the same terminology you use when you make prints. You lay down plates, and so then it's the idea they look like circuits or manufacturing circuits, or what's also known as sigils. And
Yes, yes.
we talked about that sigils before.
Very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
sigils.
so now that you know sigils, once you see that, and once you see those plates, look at them not in the way that most would look at something as just being one flat image, but look at it as, if you see color changes, separate all those similar colored areas as a unit and see what the different shapes make up, and you'll be able to see that they stack
Right.
top to bottom, and then you'll actually see what the power of that plate is, and it's not going to be what you think it is. And then you also have like you have H.P. Lovecraft had the Necronomicon. I want to say
That's right.
the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that the way you say that?
Yeah. I would say
And
so. Yeah.
yeah, and so you have necro, which of course would be dead, right, or corpse, and then nomicon, which would be let's say law, or like the idea of custom. So it's the idea of implying in the book or a text. So a law or a custom. So of the area, it's not so much the idea of a truth more than it is a law or a custom. A law or a custom doesn't mean it's true. It just means that's what's accepted at that place. So then that's what that kind of book. So it would be the Book of Laws of the Dead, huh? Or like
I guess so. Yeah. Well,
So
he was definitely into all sorts of that kind of stuff.
yeah. So and then, well, I know then that I guess the spoiler of that whole idea, that whole book would be, is that as you supposedly go into the rituals of these different powers, is that it actually, you face madness more and more. You actually, the abyss stares back at you, and you actually go nutty because you're seeking. And this is the end of this, is kind of like the spoiler of that, and that's why it's the Laws of the Dead and the Book of the Dead names, because these are those that were seeking forbidden knowledge and they didn't know when to stop. You know?
Yeah, that's the takeaway of
that.
Yeah,
that's
for
very
sure.
interesting as well. Yeah, so it's kind of like if you just like when
I would definitely look at doing a whole thing on H.P. Lovecraft and his influence on the Alien, the Geiger stuff from the Alien.
Right.
It was very much Lovecraftian for sure.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Nice.
So many things to talk about.
Yeah, man.
So many things to talk about.
So you want to talk about the how are we on time?
What's the time? Have we finished Gilligan's Island? Because you don't escape. That's the takeaway. You do not get off Gilligan's Island.
You don't escape the idea.
Yeah.
Well, it's also like with the idea of incantation, or the 3G7 is the idea of within witchcraft, because you have in that first that one we talked about with voodoo, it's basically witchcraft, but you have the idea of creating gateways. So then that's the idea of the three. 1, 2, 3. All right, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6, or it becomes present. 3 becomes boom. 9 idle. 6 9 6 9 6 9.
And Gilligan's Island's GI, which is also used all over the place, glycemic index, but it adds up to number 7. So it's G's the 7, and I's the 9. So you got 16, which is 1 and 6 is 7. So the 7's in the title alone.
Yeah, and anytime you have, just so for those paying attention to like the code, anytime you have a single digit, you already that's easy broken down in what I've already told you. But anytime you have a double digit, it's simply whatever the first digit is in front of the second. So a 1 2 would be, the idea of the light before the concern. That's all. The idea of the 1 before the 9 is the light before the idol. That's it. So if you pick up that light of that idol, whatever that story is, that's the one you're running with. That's your torch. You know, that's
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
running through the cave of treasures with that light in front of you, trying to scare off the shadows. You know,
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
that's how that works out. So
Well, I'll just have to say this. I met Tina Louise, who played Ginger,
oh yeah,
about 1967. Sorry, 1997.
mm-hmm.
She was in Australia, roaming around on this as an extra. Not an extra. She had a minor role in a movie by this director who did this film called Return to Whoop Whoop,
Right.
WOOPW. And blow me down, I was standing around on this film set one day, and there she was walking around with her. She had an umbrella to keep the sun off her. But so I
Uh,
don't think she'd had plastic surgery, and she still looked. She would have been in her 60s then. She still looked nice, I thought, back in the day.
right.
So I think I don't know if she's still alive, but I don't think there's many of the cast of Gilligan's Island still on this planet.
They're
I'm not
alive.
sure.
They're alive tonight with us.
They certainly
Because
are.
do you know why? Do you know why someone's alive? Because you talk about them.
Yeah,
All right.
it's
So
pretty an
that's how you know
unforgettable
someone's
show.
alive. Yeah.
An unforgettable show.
That's how you know.
Unforgettable show.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then, hey, man. So did you want to hear about the the pickup?
Yes, I do. And what you go for it, man. I was going to
Well,
ask you
I
about
know that
Mount. Yeah.
I know that your buddy Rollo likes to hear about the cannabis, and he actually
He does. He, he's a
blow me down,
frustrated.
Rick. Blow me
Yeah.
down. But Rick, I heard him say that he was going to toke a jaybird.
No, he said pull on a big blunt.
Oh well, that's fine too. That's fine. It's the same difference.
He,
Do you know what a
it would
blunt
probably
is?
do him. Yeah, it was the bigger version of the sort of
Oh, okay, yeah.
hand.
Because I want to make sure
hand
it's not the same. It's the same. You know, here as
isn't
it
it a
is
hand
there.
filled? It's a hand. Well, isn't it more of a hand filled? You can buy the
Yeah.
empty ones and fill them up.
Well, you
Yeah.
break. You can either buy the empty wraps or you buy the Swisher Sweets, which are you just crack them open with you run your thumbnail down the length of it. You crack them open slightly. You get rid of all the loose tobacco in it. You refill that casing with your dry bud. You know your cannabis. You refill it. You go ahead and you wet that seam. You close it up. Then you go ahead and you just toke on it. The reason I don't like it is because you got the residual tobacco leaf, which is if you like that though, it makes for a great cigar.
I reckon it would add to the flavour to the smoker out there. That would go.
It makes for.
That's not. Yeah.
Oh, I've smoked my fair share of them. Don't get me wrong.
I don't know why. I'm not doubting you there, man.
Well, I had a guy when I used to work in Florida. I used to back before I got to Arizona. I was in Florida for a while, and when I was there, I was working in an old folks' home, and there was this guy who worked in the kitchen, and he always rolled blunts. So I would always smoke blunts with him. I worked on the maintenance crew, so it was me and one other dude. So he would always smoke blunts, so I always smoked blunts with him. I'd roll by his crib after work because he was at the way home. So I'd roll by his crib. He'd be out there. I'd roll him up. I introduced him to oil. He had never done oil because he was from Florida, so they don't really get that product there, very often. And I introduced him to oil, and that changed his outlook. And what I made was, do you know what worked well? Was I made if you take, now let's just say you take a zigzag, Rick. Yeah. Take a zigzag, and let's say that it was made of blunt material, so kind of a harder cigar material, and let's say that you ripped it into strips about as wide as your thumb. Now, if I drip 2 drips of oil every so often on that thing, and then I give it back to you, what you do is you put that into your blunt. You lay it down into your blunt, like in the middle, and you cover it up with green. You go ahead and you go ahead and wet and close that seam. You go ahead and light it up, and you're going to go ahead and see some nice blue dream.
I bet you will. I bet you do. It'll probably smell nicer too.
Yeah. So tonight's is brought to you by one that I picked up called Cactus Breath.
Cactus breath.
Cactus
Okay.
Breath. Yeah, it's covered. It's a cross between cactus, which is Afghani Northern Lights. Remember, I had a different Northern Lights.
Yes,
I had
talk about that.
well, this is slightly different. This is cactus, so this is Afghani crossed with Northern Lights, and then it's crossed with Mindo Breath, which is kind of a Mendocino Purps. Mendocino
Wow.
Purps is really sweet. That's a very like a purpley flower if you look at it when it's growing, very purpley and very resinous. It's glistening. It's like bling bling. Now bling, if you have bling, that means that those trichomes at the end are really bouncing. And I'll tell you a way if you're a grower and you want to go naturally at the end when you do your rinse. So let's say you're about 2 weeks away from finishing.
Yes.
If you have 2 rinses left, let's say you're going to rinse your soil 2 more times. On the one before the last, go ahead and just put in a little bit of molasses into your water. So let's say for 5 gallons you would put in about two tablespoons. That's all. Mix that into that water. Run it through your soil. Those roots are going to go ahead and soak that up for that last little bit, because you're running the plants. You're going to run that water through. It's going to live off of that for a little bit. You're going to run one more rinse through of just plain water. Then after about a week, you're going to chop it down and hang it. What happens though is the trichomes are going to get a real nice bling to them under the microscope. They're going to look really nice and shiny with that little addition of molasses. And that's a little something I used to always do, and it gave it that little extra pop in the bag, because bag appeal is where it's at. If you're going to be dropping off an eighth or a quarter or a zip to somebody, you need bag appeal, because you're going to lay that zip down, and they're going to be like, they look at it as soon as you look at it. If you know what you're looking at, you're like, okay, gotcha. All right, gotcha, because it passed the eye test. The second test is you pick it up and you don't even, as gentle as like like you're picking up a baby bird. You just slightly with your fingertips press onto those nugs. You can feel it. All right. Once it does that, there's only one last test, and that's to try it, to smoke it, to toke it, and that's no joke it. And then you go, and then you hit it, and you're done. And then that's the I just gave you the secret to testing bud, in the easy steps.
And
that's
how
how
they got it for free. They got it for free on Bongversation number 17.
Yeah,
they got it for free. Bongversation
so
17.
So Cactus Breath. Cactus Breath. That's the update. So that's the update, Rick. Now we're leaving. But guess what? We're getting off of Gilligan's Island. They can stay there. That mindset is gone. Also remember, and keep an eye, all fine people, for the 7. The idea of the 7 code throughout news, movie, everything. Once they're giving you that, they're about to feed you something. It's up to you. It's up to you to discern truth from fiction. So do better out there. Those keep falling for nonsense. Okay. Cheers.
Yeah, and you're listening to the Grandmaster. Let me just say this: we'll blow some smoke, blow some cactus up this man. These shows, you're getting some stuff that nobody ever else has come up and broken down. Have you ever heard Gilligan's Island broken down like that? I'm telling you now. I'm a pop culture addict, and I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I'm all these things. But Dave just broken it down again. He's blown it out of the park. Knocked it out of the park. Blown some blunt. Told us you had to do your
some blunt smokes.
So man, fantastic. And Dave, you want to knock it out of the get rid of that bot. I'll say a quick hello, and I've got a visitor popped in. So, dude, that was fantastic, man.